Hey everybody, I'm Gary McLean, and that was odd. I don't know what happened there. Just one sec. I'm having a little technical difficulty here. There we go. All right, we're back. So thanks for tuning in, everybody. I'm Gary McLean, and you are watching Talent Talk. As always, thanks for tuning in. Much appreciated. One thing, if you can go to the Talent Talk YouTube channel and subscribe today, that'd be much appreciated. And as always, your support's appreciated on that. One thing I'd like to note is we are, at least for season four, eventually for previous seasons, but right now, season four is being made available on various podcasts such as Spotify, um, Apple Podcast, iHeartRadio, Google Podcast, just to name a few. If you'd like a full list of where you can actually listen to it, check out the description details of this episode and previous season four episodes. And finally, this is live and interactive. So if you have any questions, comments, just want to say hi or make fun of me, whatever, throw it into the comments section and we will make every effort to address it as the show goes on. Now, today's guest is a BC native who spent 3 years at the William Esper Studio in Manhattan studying film and television. This was the beginning of an illustrious career as a documentary producer, producing his first feature, The Union, the business behind getting high. This debut feature garnered 33 festival entries and several Best Feature Documentary awards. Fast forward today, after other docs such as Ice Guardians, Making Coco the Grant Furious Story, and Inmate Number One, The Rise of Danny Trejo, just to name a small fraction of what he's put out. He's currently working on multiple projects, for example, with Dolph Lundgren, Jim McMahon, Jordan Tutu, and so much more. So please join me in finding out more about the man behind these projects and welcome Adam Scorgie to the show. There he is.
Thank,
There's the guy.
oh yeah. I always get Thank you for the great introduction, but I always feel awkward in these introductions now, where rambling on about my work. It feels great. Obviously, worked hard to be able to put these together, but you still have that imposter syndrome sometime, or sometimes it also feel very blessed. I go through it, I'm like, wow, yeah, I haven't thought about that one in a while. So, fortunate to be able to do what we do, and thank you very much for having me on.
Oh yeah, and again, thanks for taking time out of your busy schedule to chat. Appreciate it.
No problem.
Now, generally, I start these shows off, trying to find a little bit more out about you, and you're from Trail, BC, small town. What drove
Yeah,
you to
so
kind of want to get into this?
Yeah, so I was born in Trail, but I grew up all over the world. I lived in Edmonton. You lived in Edmonton till I was 8. You're gonna hear my trunk open here for the bottle drive. But born in Trail, BC, but I moved. Lived in Edmonton till I was about 8. Then I moved overseas and I lived in Australia, Singapore, and then I came back to live with my biological father. We lived in Kelowna, and Kelowna's probably the place now. Kelowna and Edmonton, both, as we joke, because I have lots of friends and family there, both towns claim me as their own now. And I'm proud to say I'm kind of both. I obviously reside, my kids go to school in Edmonton. I'm an Alberta producer, but I'm from and I went to high school, and really, probably those on high school years, those early adolescents are kind of where you really kind of find yourself as a person until you evolve into an adult. So uh, that's kind of where I've been all over, but I've been in Edmonton since 2013. Went to high school in Kelowna. I'm originally a BC boy, but I'd say I'm a proud Albertan now.
Okay. And having said that, I mean, obviously you're a huge hockey fan. Who's your team?
Oh, come on. There's only one. It's the Edmonton Oilers. It has to be. I can't be those Flamer fans. Come on. No diehard Oilers fans, and pretty cool. My daughter plays U18 AAA hockey, and recently her team is one of only. There's 3 teams, 2 boys teams and 1 girls team, and they're the first of their kind in the country to be fully sponsored and actually get to wear an Oilers NHL jersey. So my daughter is officially an Oiler as well for the Junior Oilers U18 team, which is pretty cool. I've been wanting to get myself a new Oilers jersey, and I wasn't sure who I was going to get, and now it's easy. I know I'm just going to get my daughter's number and her name. I never thought I'd see a Scorgie on the back of an official Oilers jersey, other than if I just put it on there myself. So, yeah, I'm a proud Oilers fan.
So who's more excited about the jersey, you or your daughter?
I think I am. Honestly, I
Yeah.
mean, she's pretty excited too. But I mean, when they showed me photos and you see your kid, you see your family name and official, like I mean, it actually has the tie downs and everything. And Riley's like, what, my daughter's like, what are these for? I'm like, those are if you drop the gloves and fight. She's like, sweet, I'm gonna have to try it just because we have them. Like, she's like, I was like, well, there's no fighting in your league. You get suspended immediately. And she's like, I don't care. I got tie downs. That's cool. So I'd say she's pretty. We're all pretty excited. It's pretty, hockey. It's been interesting with that. She's our oldest to kind of see her go through that competitive stream of sports. I haven't seen that with my kids, so it's a learning curve for me, and it certainly makes you fall in love with the sport even more than watching the pros. Since I've done through my teenage years.
Right. And so, I mean, I do want to get back a little bit into how you got started, into producing the documentaries and everything else. But I'm kind of curious because you do have a bit of a pattern when it comes to the documentaries you do in terms of sports figures, especially it seems like hockey. Um, and of course, I mentioned Grant Fuhr's doc. Like
Yep.
being an avid Oilers fan, I'm guessing that must have been quite the experience to do that documentary.
Yeah, I mean that was like a dream come true, and to become good friends with Furzy has been a really interesting. Hey, sorry, my kid's in here now. But yeah, I mean, I grew up as an Oilers fan, and then Don Metz, who a lot of people are familiar with in Alberta, he had a chance. He said, "Hey, Adam, I've got the chance to work with Grant. Would you love to do it?" And I was like, "Of course I would." I was like, "I'd love to work with Grant Fury. He's been an idol of mine in those heydays of the Oilers." So, which was really cool and kind of flattering is when we first got on a conference call with Grant. Um, I was like excited and I was like, "Hey Grant, like nice to meet you." And he's like, "Adam, I'm excited to meet you. I'm a big fan of Ice Guardians." Right. And you
Nice.
you have those moments, I have them all the time where we make sure we check in and you're humbled where you're like, I'm like, "You're excited to meet me?" Like, I mean, I grew up watching you, right? Like that super flattering to be like, "Oh my God, I can't believe you're excited to meet me." Like I'm just a filmmaker, but you forget how your work at times, right, can like it affects people, right, in different ways. And I think that's kind of where documentary filmmakers or creators have the best of both worlds in that we can have work that inspires and affects people, but people still don't really know who we are. So we can still have that anonymity, like like a really big actor or something like that won't have that, right? But we as producers, like you'd have to really know, you'd have to really do your homework to be like, oh, that's Adam, that's producer. We actually I was flattered by that. We were just in LA for Dane Cook's new premiere because that's a new documentary we're working on. Is his new doc. He just did his first comedy special in over a decade, and there's a guy that came up to me. He's like, "Hey, you're Adam, right?" And I was like, "Yeah." He's like, "Can I get a picture with you?" And I'm like, "You want a picture with me?" Right? And he was like, "Yeah." And I was like, how do you?" I was like, I wasn't trying to. I'm like, "Well, how do you know who I am?" He's like, "Oh, well, my agent said I should come here. This would be a great networking thing, and I want to get into documentaries, and I follow your work." And I was like, "Wow, that was a new one for me."
No, that's awesome though, right? Like,
Yeah. Oh,
and
dude, super flattering. It's always weird when someone because I get to work with all these amazing talents. So I'm always shocked that like someone will want my autograph or a picture with me. I'm like, why? I'm just obviously super flattered and I'll always make time and do it. But I'm just always like, you don't want Dolphs or like tutus or Fures? Like you want mine? Sure. Like whatever. I'll like it. That's like mine seems useless, but sure.
yeah, and are you finding now that people are like coming to you saying, "Hey, let's do this doc"?
Yeah, now is really like I kind of said before we were going live, is it's really started to compound in the last few years where now a lot, especially because I found a real niche, right? Like if there's one talent that I do, I will claim that I do as good, if not better, than almost anybody in this country, is I understand the financing mechanisms in Canada and how to finance documentaries. And cash is king. I don't mean to insult other filmmakers or creators, but talent is a dime a dozen. When you have money, you can get talent. You can get any talent you want, right? That is, I've been in the meetings with Universal and Netflix and Braun, and that's what their CEOs say. They're like, I can find talent. The talent's not hard. When you have money, that's easy to get. What's hard to get is the financing. And that's what everybody forget. When you go to any market or you go to any film festival, what is every filmmaker, creator, director, producer? What are they all looking for? Money.
Money.
The hardest thing to get. And I was like, when you have them, especially if you have lots of money, you can hire anyone. Nowadays, you can reach out to the biggest actors around and put in an offer, right? You go through the right casting agent, you can do that. You can get any director, That's actually my meeting with Universal recently. It was like, hey, Adam, if you want to finance things outside of Canada, we should start looking at maybe partnering you with some of the big U.S. directors that we work with under our thing, because we love your thing and we really want to kind of keep you in the Universal umbrella. And I was like, wow, that's amazing. I was like, I'm like, but then I was like, you realize when you say that. So I met with the senior vice president of acquisitions for Universal in LA last week, and they initiated the meeting because they said, look, we've had two smash hits with you with inmate number one, the rise of Danny Trejo, and Bisbing have been two of their most successful acquisitions ever. Inmate has outperformed Three Identical Strangers, which was longlisted for an Academy Award or shortlisted. And Bisbing has broken like all records they've had for any acquisition, even beating the Conor McGregor doc. So they were like, we would really like to see other ways we can work with you. So when they suggested this of working with Americans, I'm like, I'd love to not have to do all that extra paperwork and the tax credits and all that. But I'm like, you do realize if you do that, then that means you guys have to spend more, right? And then the university guy was like, well, yeah, let's go case by case basis and we'll figure it out here, because then they can't just come in. Because the way our business model works, though, getting into the weeds, is that I'll typically talk to talent. They'll either come to me or we'll approach and say, look, we can get anywhere from $750,000 to $1 million budget with a minimum of 60% of that, soft money backed through the Canadian system. And sometimes if we can hit all the grants and CMF, we can get 100% of that covered, right? So we have no gap. So then when we sell, and that's just Canada. So then we can sell it internationally to Netflix, Amazon, Universal, whoever. And that money is then split 50-50 between the town and my team. And I always do 50-50. Yeah, you could be grind more as a producer and say, oh, I'm not going to give you 50%. But documentaries, like almost all indie products now, are how are you going to promote it? And to me, it's always way more valuable to be 50-50 part of somebody, especially with somebody's life story, right, than to try to nickel and dime them and only have them own 20% or 30%, because then you'll get that effort in the promotion, right? So the way Universal's sales structure works is when we do a deal with Universal, they'll do 80% upon delivery, and then the other 20% after the talent has promoted it for the 2 days that they do. So they hold a good chunk of your MG or minimum guarantee contingent to them doing the promotion. Because documentaries, like unlike any other independent film these days, is if you don't have the promotion behind it, how do you break through the plethora of content on today's, like, that's one thing. It's never been easier, I think, to make content, but it's never been harder to break through and have something actually connect with audiences. I mean, when you've got Lord of the Rings spending $700 million with a giant built-in audience over decades, from the books to the movies to the, how do you compete with a $5 to $10 million movie that you're just going to put on platforms and hopefully people see it? You don't. So that's where we've kind of found this niche with docs, is that the docs, we do them on high profile individuals that really want to share their story. And then they have a huge built-in audience. And then when they go promote it, it does very well commercially and also well, critically.
Right. That's a lot of great information, by the way, especially for a filmmaker like me trying to figure some stuff out. So thanks for that.
No, I'm happy. That's another thing that if you've heard me talk before, we've been able to chat before. Is like something that I hated when I got into this industry is I hated this whole thing of people not sharing information. Like somehow if I share information with you, it's going to take away from me, was the mentality of the old school producers. And I never understood that. I always thought that was so stupid and insecure, because if you're not pitching the same project as me. And even if you were, let the best man win. I am confident in my abilities that if you and me are pitching the same thing, I will beat you. And I don't just mean you. I mean, like, if we're both pitching a doc, I will beat 90% of people at the table because I know what I'm doing. That's all I focused on for the last 10 years, right? And my numbers and success speak for themselves of what my team can accomplish. I can compete. Nowadays, I'm competing when I'm pitching certain people. I'm competing with like LeBron James and Drake and their companies. They're like, oh, Adam Uninterrupted took the project from you. They wanted to go with LeBron. I'm like, fair. I'd probably want to go with LeBron too. Like, why wouldn't they? Like, what can I say? Right. I just always hated that thing with producers. And another thing, I've talked about this lots, and this still, I'd advise any filmmaker, if any filmmaker tries to do this bullshit, or any producer tries to say, oh, we can't show you the budget, or we can only show you the top line, get the fuck away from that team immediately. No other business does that, where you don't show a budget. You build a house, your builder doesn't go, I can't show you the budget, I can only show you the overalls, right? No other business does that except the film business. And that's changing now, thankfully, because back in the day, it used to be connections and it was hard to meet people. But now the internet, like, you can go on IMDb and you can get in front of anyone. If you have a good proposal, any agent or manager will hear you if you have the financing, right? If you put together a good proposal. You used to need producers to have to connect you and do that stuff. And sure, there's still relationships that are hard to get without one of those producers, but get this hiding the budget thing makes no sense to me. I do the opposite. I go see what I can get for my docs, and then I go to my whole team. I go to my director, my DOP. I say, hey, here's how much we got. Here's how much. Everybody has to be able to make a living off of this. And I will preface that I say I don't think anybody in the film industry or in the creative space makes what they're really earned for time and effort. If you were to compare it to like oil and gas or an investment banker, like none of us, right? Unless you're like James Cameron or Scorsese or,
Right.
one of the top 1%, none of us do. But by being transparent and honest like that, my team always bends over backwards, right? If we're over budget, then usually the DOP, right? Everyone would say, hey, look, we're like 50 grand over. Can everybody take a 5 grand pay cut? And we make sure that we deliver something spectacular. Sure, let's do that, right? And if we get it back in tax credits, like what you get out of your team, because I used to line produce for companies that did that cloak and dagger bullshit, is that like you nickel and dime your team will nickel and dime you. They'll start going, okay. They're like, oh, you want to charge me? You want to not tell me what's going on or nickel? Okay, we're over 10 hours. We're now at time and a half. We're over 12 hours. We're now at double time. You want me to turn my phone on in the States? I'm going to charge you data, right? You end up getting so much more productivity and work from your team just being honest and transparent going in. So that's always what I do. I say, look, here's the budget. Here's what we do. Here's what I'm worth, right? Like, and everybody's like, oh, well, how come you get a good chunk? I'm like, well, I brought all the money. And then the way the money works for those that might not have financed anything in the last little while is like, nobody just gives you the money. Like you go to Netflix, not like Netflix, like, we love it. Here you go. Here's your $10 million. Go make it. No, they'll give you a piece of paper and they'll maybe give you 10% of it. Then you have to go put your neck on the line and go secure it against your house or get other private lenders or go do that to interim finance it. Then once you deliver, Netflix payment terms specifically really suck. Once you deliver, then they're going to go, okay, we're now going to pay you in quarterly statements over the next 5 years. So you have to carry that money for your project, sometimes 3 to 5 years. So that's what a producer gets paid for, is how to navigate all that financing and cash flows. Okay, I'll be. Okay, I'll e-transfer with you. Oh yeah, thank you. Sorry, they're just wrapping up there. So,
Yeah,
but
no worries.
those are what I learned really quickly, is that people, even some people who have produced, and I'm doing air quotes for those listening, um, have produced, that they don't realize the financing part. I've worked with even very talented directors that I remember I had a classic story where I had a director, we went through, we'd already secured the budget for one of our projects, but then he really hadn't paid attention. And then once the money was like, hey, we need you to come to Vancouver. Let's go over every little bit of this. And I said, sure. So we went line by line. And then they were like, okay, Adam, who gets the producer fees in the line item that you showed us? I'm like, I do. They're like, okay, all of it? And I'm like, yes. And then they're like, who gets the corporate overhead? I'm like, I do. And they're like, all of it? I'm like, yes. They're like, why do you get all those fees? And I said, okay, well, see the $700,000 budget? I brought all of it. And as I just explained, I'm also taking care of all the interim financing. I'm like, if you guys want to interim finance the tax credits, which are $250,000, and alleviate that from my personal loans or securing against my house, no problem. I'll cut my fees in half right now. And then the conversation went really quick. They're like, yep, you're owed all those fees. That makes sense. No problem. Signed right off, right? Can you actually, because even a lot of people can't go do that. Go to a bank and try, right? If you don't have a ton of equity in your house, or you haven't done anything, like banks are so strict nowadays, you have to be like perfect, like perfect credit, perfect this, perfect that to even get it. So it's hard to do that. And that is what I've learned is really, for better or worse, become my specialty. That's what, like, even now, like broadcasters in Canada and stuff, if people are having troubles with a project that the broadcaster really likes, but they can't figure out how to get their financing, oftentimes they're like, you should talk to Adam. He always finds a way to get these things done.
Right. Yeah. I mean, wow. information overload. That's great
Yeah,
stuff,
sorry
man.
if this is too technical and people are getting boring. Sorry,
Oh
that's
no,
just kind of
no,
what's running through my
no,
mind all the time.
no, absolutely not, man. That's the best. In fact, I'll just share this post real quick. Somebody just noted that very good info, so they're happy to listen to what you're saying. So,
Oh, happy to
um,
share. It's what I always recommend to filmmakers is that learn the business side the best you can, because this is called the film business. If you want it to be a hobby, then it's going to treat you like a hobby. That was advice given to me when I was in my early 20s. Like, Adam, the sooner you start treating this like a business, the sooner the business will start reciprocating that to you. When you keep treating it like a hobby, it will treat you like a hobby. Like, oh, don't worry, I'll just do this one pro bono. Oh, don't worry, we'll try to make it up for later. No, understand the business. And what I mean by that too is also when you're creating a project, and I've been guilty of this too. When we have a project, we all think we have the greatest idea ever. We're like, oh, it's the greatest. It isn't, right? None of us have the greatest idea ever. We all just have good ideas, and then we have to put them through, the gauntlet to test them to see if they're good. And something I think a lot of filmmakers forget, and or maybe some of them kind of, it's like the yin and the yang of the creative filmmaker, or the true creative. We're like, I don't really care about commercial success. You need to care about commercial success, because if you do not make your distributor money, or you do not get your streamer lots of views, well, then they don't come back to you. And then that project may as well not even be on your resume. Because if you spent a ton of money and it didn't make any money and it didn't get eyeballs, well, none of those distributors want to work with you again. Right? You need to understand how to make your distributor money. So this goes back to what I was saying, is we all think we have the best idea, but what we don't often look at with our best idea is, how does our idea fit into the person we're pitching it to? We get so excited that we finally get an Amazon meeting or a Hulu meeting or a Netflix meeting, and we just go in there and regurgitate everything. We're like, oh, our project's the best because it's going to be this and it's going to be this. Did you even ask what the broadcaster distributor is looking for? What is their age demographic they're really trying to hit? What market are they really trying to connect with? What have they had previous success with that they'd like to blend into? I've made these mistakes too, because I get so passionate about something I want to do. Not anymore. Like, that is something that when I'm meeting with a new distributor, I go on and do a whole bunch of work and I see what was a hit for them. What did they do well with? What did they spend a little bit of money, have a breakthrough success? What other projects similar to mine? Right. And then that way it can help you to have what objectives they could bring into your conversation. Because the better you understand their business, the more you can apply that and what they're looking for to your project and sell it. Because the other thing we got to remember is, when we're pitching, we're one of hundreds of projects that get pitched every week, right? And we all think it's the greatest idea ever. But I tell this story to bring humility to all of us. Is the very first time I got an official Netflix meeting in Netflix, right? I'd had 4 titles on Netflix at this point, but I was still considered an unsolicited producer and could not pitch them directly. So fortunately, I'm very close with my sales agent. We work more as like producers together. He brought me with the meeting, which is a big taboo too. People are like, I can't believe you bought the producer. Now he can sidestep you. And I just don't work like that. I'm an ethical guy. I would never sidestep my sales agent. He's a family friend. So we go to Netflix. We're waiting in the lobby. Not one bit of an exaggeration. 10 feet to my left, sitting on the bench, waiting patiently with a friend, is Keanu Reeves. As we're also waiting, Adam Sandler comes walking out with his posse of like 10, 15 people. He had just finished a meeting and was coming out of the lobby. I bring this up not because, wow, there's celebrities in the lobby of Netflix, but that's who you're pitching against. In my mind, right away, I was like, wow, Keanu Reeves is waiting patiently to pitch his representative at Netflix, just like I am. Adam Sandler just finished pitching his representative at Netflix, is coming out the door. So whatever I'm pitching better be fucking amazing, because that's who I'm competing against. So my brilliant idea that's so amazing that everybody wants, that's my competition. Now, thankfully for me, I do documentaries. So I gave myself some confidence, being like, pretty sure Keanu Reeves isn't doing a documentary. Pretty sure Adam Sandler isn't doing a documentary. So I'm not having to compete with them. Whew, thank God. But that is who you're pitching against. Like, think about it. When you're going to the big ones, you want to pitch to HBO, Netflix, Showtime, Hulu. That's who your competition is. You're pitching against Seth Rogen at Amazon Prime, Netflix. You're pitching against everybody, so your pitch better be fucking spectacular. That's another thing I always recommend to people is I see right when you get this pitch that looks like you put it together over a weekend, that ain't fooling anybody. Everyone can tell that you put that pitch together over the weekend. It's like rushing your homework and hoping you're going to get an A when your teacher actually gives you a C. You're kind of like, what? And the teacher's like, you did that on the weekend. You're like, yeah, well, but I did put in like an hour. You're like, yeah, that's a C's worth of work. If you're that passionate about your project and you really want to try to get financing, and it is fucking hard to get anything financed these days, you better not put in a C effort to your pitch materials. That's first impressions. Your pitch materials better look spectacular when you lay them out. Otherwise, why would we want to invest? I even do that now when people pitch me a doc and level one pager, it looks like crap. I'm kind of like, why would I? You obviously didn't put effort in your pitch. Why would I want to go get investors for you on this? Right? Or at that point, I'll do all the heavy lifting and then you want to be 50-50 partners. No, thanks. I can do it on my own. Sorry, I don't
Right.
know if that's where you wanted to go with this, but I was kind of
No,
venting.
that's
These are all things that I've learned in my, that was one thing, even when I started early in my career, all the broadcasters in Canada was like, man, your presentation material is next to none. I used to do them on those Apple books that they don't make anymore. And you'd slide them out of the sleeve. And I remember broadcasters would be like, whoa, are you giving me like an iPad right now? And I'm like, calm down. It's not that good of a pitch, right? Like, but I'd make the table. My idea was always making the pitch look so good that if I just laid it on a counter, people would actually think it's a coffee table book bought from Barnes and Noble or Chapters. I wanted it to stand out because back when we used to do physical presentations, which are pretty much gone now, when you think about the stack that would come through a market like AFM or Sundance or wherever you're pitching, if yours stood out that much when it's laying on a desk, it's going to get people's attention, right? And get people talking about it. So I always wanted first impressions to be, and I find that the big disconnect in the creative industry because so many people, because it's creative and it's passionate and it's about being creative and all that, you often forget like that it is a business and your business acumen better be on point too. You better have a financial structure. You better have a budget. You better have a good idea of where you're going to get your money. And don't put this on your business plan. When this comes into my business plan, it makes sense. Well, there's a billionaire in my neighborhood that I would like. I'm family friends with him. I'll just get my money from him. No. I don't know if you guys have ever worked with billionaires. I've been fortunate enough to, or unfortunate. I've worked with a few. They are often the cheapest business people out there. They became a billionaire because they don't like losing $100. So if you think they're just going to donate to your film out of the goodness of their heart, unless they're maybe a very close personal family friend, they're not. Right? They are going to want to see an ROI, return on investment, how long that money's tied up, what kind of interest is going to get on their money, what kind of play they're going to get in that. Smart businessmen are smart businessmen. So you better have those things laid out for your film or documentary, just like as if you're going to a bank or just like you were getting a drawdown on a house or a new business. I don't know why in our business we tend to not have those components put together, but if you want to make this a business and not a hobby, then make sure your business is lined up for whatever project you're truly passionate about bringing to life.
all amazing recommendations for sure. I do have a question that popped up here, so I'm just going to share it.
Sure.
What do you recommend, Adam, for producers who don't have a dime and want to create amazing pitch deck but can't afford to hire a graphic designer?
Ooh, Matt, that's a good one, bud, and that's a tough one. If you don't have a dime and you don't, then all you can do there is really lean on maybe some friends that'll do it for you and offer if they've got some kind of incentive. Maybe you can hire them as a camera guy or something. That is a tough one. I don't really have a good answer for that other than, you know, if you if you have a passion to make something, whatever it is, script, dramatic, feature film, doc, and it's a burning desire, like your first couple projects have to be such a strong burning desire that you're going to find a way by hook or by crook, I always say, to get it done. You'll find a way to put together that money for a designer, right? You'll be like, hey, look, even if I have to do it in bits and parts and save up, like it'd be like saving up when you're younger for that PlayStation you wanted or that car that you wanted to get. Like if you have to put it together, I always did it like this when I was beyond broke, like broker than most people that are in 26s. I invested all my money in the union and it had made fuck all at this point. And everybody thought I was a crazy. They're like, what, Adam, you like own a nightclub, you had money and you gave it all up and you want to make this film about marijuana, like documentary, if you lost your mind. I'd put it this way. When I was so broke, I remember my daughter's young then. I'm a young father and I'm trying to figure out that life and that expense and how it's changed everything. And, you know, I'd get a couple hours a day and I would plot this out. I'd be like, okay, my daughter's going to nap at this time from these 2 to 3 hours. So at that point, I have to, my wife worked during the days, I worked at night. So I'd have to do dinner and clean the house too. So I'd clean the house, get everything ready, try to do that in an hour, and then be like, okay, this gives me a solid hour and a half to start doing research about how I can put together that pitch deck, or how I can put together the research needed, or distributors I wanted to reach out to, or get 10 or 12 emails to people I wanted to pitch something to. Donate, like, allocate your time like you're a professional athlete, or like you're going for something, or like you had film school, or you're going to school. We often don't do that, right? We often find, like the book The War of Art talks about, is that we often procrastinate and put all these things ahead of it, right? I would force myself, and it wasn't easy for me. I'm like anybody else. I procrastinate, I have ADD, I go all over the place, but I would schedule it like as if I was training for a fight, because I used to box, and be like, I better get my training in. I better put this work in. I better put those hours. The boys want to go out for beers. Can't meet them. I got to donate those 2 or 3 hours. That's the hours I don't have my daughter, and it's not my time with my wife, and I don't have to work. So those are the hours I have to put through. And don't let those things get in the way of, like, well, I should probably do my laundry first. I should probably do this. Like, we all do that. That's resistance, right? Things will come up that we, and I remember, it's one of the few books I've read. I don't read a lot of book. I will confess to that. But The War of Art by Scott Pressfield, I think Scott Pressfield, talks about that, where he says that you will put all these things ahead of the thing that you're truly passionate about. I don't know why we do it. It's resistance we put there. So, long answer to you, Matt, if you're really broke, I would just find all those little extra jobs you're doing, right? If you make $100 somewhere, put 80 aside or 50 aside, which you can afford, and build up for it. Or if you have the ability and you have some great people that can create those pitch decks and stuff like that, and maybe do it on a pro bono, or like you say, look, I can't afford it, can we do a payment plan? Or if they design it and come part of the project, that is the one thing, is it is tough. And I remember being so broke, but I would literally, any extra money I get, I put into my pitch deck, like over buying myself clothes or cologne or any of those things, to make sure I had it. Like, if this truly is, I would say to myself, if this truly is what I believe and I'm super passionate about, then why am I doing all these extracurricular things in front of it? I would cut all those things out and I put it towards what I needed to get done, even if it took me longer, or I had to go on a payment plan if I couldn't get somebody to do it. Also, Matt, obviously, I think you know about it. ESIO has stuff about that. There's, there is some grants and funds, and that's a whole other job in itself. But that would be my advice, is just, find a way, rather than find a way to make an excuse not to do it. Find a way to put together the money to get it done.
And he just had a follow-up comment to what you were just talking about. He says, I'm so guilty of that, and I need to read that book. Good points, good info.
we
I
are
appreciate it.
we all are. I'm not saying this is like, oh, you do it. I do it too. I still even do it now. The only thing is, now I really can't procrastinate, because, like, I have to get tax credits in, because the bank loans are hounding me. I have to get these things in, like, trust me. And then I do like anybody else. I'm like a pigeon. A beep will go on my phone. I'm like, oh, what's that? I'm like, Adam, you cannot focus on that stuff right now. Dive in. Tax credit applications. These things need to get done. Now, fortunately or unfortunately, I have a lot of people that depend on me for subcontracting jobs. So there's a lot of pressure that it's not just about me now. Like, there's other people that make a living from Scorgie Productions and what I do. So my responsibility is also bleed into other people, which really makes it where now I don't have the opportunity to get distracted. Like, I have to deliver and I have to get things done. So, Matt, I say this as a homie, brother. Like, I struggle with it every week, and I have to hone myself in and push myself. It's never like you're just going to figure it out and it's done. A great piece of advice my stepfather gave to me, and I do this probably once a week. We all will have this phone call or presentation or whatever, something we don't want to tackle, or like, oh, we have to do our Cavco Part B application, or our Part A, or our FTTC application for those Alberta producers. And you're like, oh, that stuff's so miserable, bureaucratical paperwork. Nobody likes it. If there's somebody that likes it, send me an email and I will hire you immediately, because nobody likes it, but we all have to do it. That is the lifeblood of our industry. And my dad always told me, he's like, Adam, when you come in on a Monday, now my stepfather was really successful. He's the president of Cameron Oil Industries, which got bought out by Schlumberger. He's done very well. And he would always say, Adam, he's like, when I had something that was weighing on me that I just was like, oh, it's going to be miserable, I don't want to do it, it's going to suck, I would tackle that first thing when I got into the office, because then several things happen. Is one, starting 90% of the time when you tackle that thing, it's not nearly as bad as you had it in your head. When you actually start going through it, you're like, this was not bad. I actually learned how to do this, and the application isn't as, like, 90, I can say with me personally, 95% of the time, it's never as bad as, I don't know what it is in your head. The resistance gets in there, starts pushing against you because it's not super fun. It's not like when you're on set, right? But and then you get it done. Then the second thing is once you've taken that burden or that weight of that thing that you're trying to push off, then the rest of the day is like, okay, bring on, you know what? Just tackle the FTC, bring on Cavco now. Let's bring on that tough call where I'm probably going to get rejected. Like now, once you get that off, then the rest of the day seems easy. But we all resist, like, like there'll be a phone call that I'm like, oh, this is probably going to get into an argument. We're arguing about fees or something like that. And and I tackle it first thing in the morning, and then everybody's like hunky dory. I'm like, man, I was anticipating that call to be so much worse than it was. It ended up being super easy. So that bit of advice my stepdad gave to me, and I go through it once a week because there'll always be things coming up. I'm like, oh my God, I don't want to do this application. Oh, I don't want to do this budget review. Oh, I don't want to do that. I tackle it first thing. I get in rather than even check my mail or any of those other things I'm procrastinating to put in front of it. I'm like, no, let's do Cavco, deal with miserable Cavco first thing in the morning. Let's get this phone call that I don't want to do. I'll schedule it, be like Monday morning. I get in at 9:30, drop my kids off at school at 9. Let's get this. Let's bang it out.
All great advice. I don't know what your time is like. I mean, we are past the 30-minute mark. I know you've got your kids with you here and stuff
They
like that.
actually
So
went to McDonald's, so I got about another 5 to 10 minutes. We want to roll if there's anything in particular you want to. Sorry, as you see, I think you've asked me 3 questions and I've rambled on for 30 minutes. It's a problem of mine.
no, the thing is, it's all just amazing information that filmmakers like myself and I know others that will watch it, or if they're not watching right now, will love the information. So
I love to share it. I really do. I hope people really get a sense of what me and Scorgie production. I've always done this because I hated that culture of producers of like not sharing, like somehow helping other filmmakers takes away from you is absolutely idiotic. And any producer or director or anyone in the creative space that thinks that, I would recommend staying away from them. I truly do love seeing. I would love nothing more than if my advice helped Matt, who's just on. I recognize Matt Waterworth. That's my boy. Shout out. If that helped him and he got a pitch and it got financed, I'd be fucking stoked for him. I'd be the first one to be like, congratulations, I'm pumped for you. And then down the road, maybe you can share something you learned with me. I hate this idea of not helping. I love now how there's, at least in Canada, we're doing a lot of things. We have Story Hive. We have these things. We have things that we're trying to help. None of those resources were there when I started, right? And very few filmmakers. I had one filmmaker, and we are friends to this day, is Billy Corbin. Helped out when I reached out to him on the MySpace days. For you youngins that might not know, there's a platform before Facebook was very popular called MySpace. I don't even know if it's around anymore. But I reached out to him and he replied. And the reason I thought of him is because when I would go pitch, everybody would say that the union that we were still in production of reminded everybody of like the marijuana version of Cocaine Cowboys, which was a giant success for him. And he's done series and everything now and all this kind of stuff. But Billy was one of the few that he's like, hey, Adam, here's a couple of, like, you asked really good questions and bang, bang, bang. And he helped me out. And then my other buddy, Brian Storkel, that's a very successful filmmaker in the States. Like he showed me how to use American fair use doctrine and these things. So, nobody does this on their own. I don't care how talented you are or whatever. You have help. You have a great team. That's why there's credits at the end of the film. It takes a team to make it. I'm really good, Scorgie Productions, and I am really good at what I do, but I work with some of the best directors, cinematographers, and editors in the country. I'm not the creative guy. I am the financial guy. That's what my forte. I know my strengths and I know my weaknesses, and I don't try to do it. It takes a great team, and I love helping other people succeed. And I've actually had it come back 3 times where I've helped people, because I used Danny Trejo's model there, which I think great. I think you were in the inmate premiere, right? Is that the key with wanting to help is you expect nothing in return. I don't do it expecting. I don't want to credit. Trust me, I'm busy enough. I could care less about credits nowadays. I could care less about any. I am not going to take your idea. I do not need. I'm so busy with my own stuff. I don't need anything other than I see you succeed. Awesome. Maybe down the road you're like, you know what? Adam never asked for anything. There's a project I think he'd be perfect for. Let's try to bring him in. And I've had three filmmakers do that now where I didn't ask for anything. They got a hold of me. They had great questions. They approached it the right way. I was happy to help. And then when they got green lit on something, they're like, I'd like to bring you in. I'd like to step this up, and we've got a little bit of money. And I don't do it hoping that that happens. But man, did that ever feel great that I was like, okay, this kind of pay it forward attitude that Scorgie does and my team puts forward, that I've actually seen it come back. Like, you don't need to be these greasy producers of the old school day. You can be honest, transparent, run good budgets, be honest with your team. I've found it over and over and over again, from being like an associate producer, production designer, line producer. You are honest and transparent and fair with your team. They are fair with you. And anyone that doesn't fit into that's probably just a piece of shit person anyway. You don't want to work with them, right? So, but I've found like, I really do like helping people. So the more my information, I hope it helps people, and I'm easy to reach out to try to get more information. I like to see other people win. When I see other people I know from Alberta winning, I'm pumped to be like, fucking yeah, kicked ass. You got in this festival, you did well, absolutely awesome.
Awesome. I do have another comment and a quick question from Matt as well.
Sure.
The comment is actually from Nick Bull. He says he just wanted to say thank you, Adam. Great info and energy. Looking forward to
Happy to
connecting.
help, brother.
And Matt just had a quick question. What's the latest on the NFT project?
So we've got Shane's actually down at the NFT Outlaw auction all this week in Vegas. So we did this for a little bit because we really wanted to learn more. This is a new industry, right? That is constantly turning, and obviously with the way the economy went after COVID and everything, all cryptocurrency and NFTs have taken a little bit of a hit. So this worked out perfect. This is a live auction company that's been around for 4 decades. They do physical auction stuff, but then obviously they see the trend, and their CFO is a very, very smart businessman that made his first $250,000 when he was like 14 years old, when they announced that deposits on milk jugs was going to double, and he went and bought everything and doubled his money. So Shane and I really, because Shane's kind of my partner on that really understands the technology better than me. So after he's done with this and we've taken back what we're going to do, then we're going to look at either partnering with like a Grand Fuhrer or one of the artists we work with. Obviously, we're working close with Dolph, we're working close with Phil Heath, Tutu, lots of people that we can start doing these great NFT art projects and make very limited runs, kind of like kind of like Artifact did, or some of these big companies did. And in fact, one of my producing partners, one of the founders of Artifact, which sold to Nike for $250 million. So we are waiting to get more information because, like everything else, we want to make sure we do it right. And obviously, those that got their Creative Hustler keys early are going to get benefited with like Easter eggs and drops and stuff like that. That those that haven't gone in yet, the idea is hopefully that they'll be like, oh, I should have bought in sooner. Yeah, you should have, right? Is that we will dive into that. So we're just waiting to see. Again, I think the auction is going in Vegas right now this week, and then when Shane gets back, we're going to be diving in and going headfirst into that market again with everything else we got going on, because we're not busy enough.
Yeah, right. Definitely not, right? You got about at least half a dozen on the go right now, I think.
Yeah, I think we're slacking for 2020, but we're trying to pick it up.
I do have a question because I spoke to a few people before the show, and I was talking about the actual Danny Trejo documentary, and I've actually had a few people go, "Where can I watch that?" So
So we are in a weird place because Super Channel brought that to life, and now Super Channel doesn't have the rights, and Universal has the worldwide rights, but they aren't doing anything with Canada. And trust me, this is a learning curve. Even when you get the big distributor, like, hey, we like carved out Canada, and now if you're doing anything with it, like, we'll buy them back because we'd like to put it on Bell or platforms or anything, rather than Canadians not being able to see it. So we are in the process of figuring that out right now. I know Bell's interested, and they might put it on Crave now for a second window and then put on platforms. But I'm hoping in the next 3 to 4 months we can have it available everywhere in Canada. We are on Universal about that, so hopefully soon, because we too are frustrated that it's crushing all these numbers in the United States and internationally, and we can't even watch it where we created it.
and I find that's fairly common for a lot of Canadian content. It seems you're able to
Well,
get it
we're
outside the Canada, but not
Yeah,
within.
so we're making sure with that now. That's actually, like I said, we just had this big meeting with Universal, which is pretty interesting, pretty surreal to, like, be one of the top 15 executives wanting to meet with me and my team. Like, it's kind of I'm still pinching myself over that, but we're just taking Canada out of the equation now. We're just saying, hey, we're not at this point, we're like, you guys don't do anything with Canada because in your eyes it's so small. So even if Universal, because it looks like they're going to pick up a third film in a row from us, Breaking Olympia, that we should be getting a formal offer next week. Not really supposed to talk about it, but oops. If they do, we're just carving Canada out. We're just saying, like, you guys don't do anything with it, so just take it out completely. We originally would take it out for the 24 months that it would be on Super Channel, so that we complied with CAFCO and the FTTC and all the tax credits. But now we're just saying, like, you guys, inmates been sitting for a year doing nothing. Like, if you guys just don't, Canada's so small to you, just take it off. Like, we want the offer you're going to give us without Canada, because we'll sell Canada better. So moving forward, every Scorgie Productions after Super Channel's premiere, because most of them are through Super Channel, it'll be available on all platforms, and we'll make sure that Canada gets what it deserves.
Awesome. No, that's awesome to hear for sure. So again, we didn't really get to touch much on your current projects, which as far as I'm concerned, is a great wash because you gave tons of great information. Um, but out of the projects that you've got coming out, what's kind of the one you're expecting to come out first? I guess would be the first one.
Well, Breaking Olympia will release probably early in the new year. That's the third one. That's about seven-time Mr. Olympia Phil Heath, who's one of the greatest bodybuilders of all time. If you had the Mount Rushmore bodybuilding, you'd have Arnold, you'd have Lee Haney, you'd have Ronnie Coleman, and you'd have Phil Heath. Dorian Yates probably be there too. So that one's just finishing. The film turned out fantastic. We got to work. Fortunately, we got to work with the Rocks company at $7, and they're our partners. So that's been really interesting for me to learn how to work with a giant company like that and kind of what that brings. And so that will be first, and then after that will be Thunder: The Life and Death of Arturo Gatti. It's a 3-part true crime doc series. So that one's interesting. I've never done one like that as a 3-parter, and it's there's pros and cons. That it's a great project. I'm very proud of it. But the challenges is with when you do a 3-part like that, it's really streaming or nothing, right? So we've kind of put ourselves in a box where we have to sell it to a streamer. Otherwise, because Universal already said we won't even touch it because we don't do 3 parts, we do features. So interesting though. I wanted that challenge, and looking, it's turned out great, and I can't wait. And then after that, Tutu will be available. That'll probably be available next fall. And then Dolph will be around that time too. And then we're just getting started on Biff Naked and Dane Cook.
Nice.
So I think that's enough for a while.
I think so. Yeah. I mean, it's great to have the work and steady work and such, but yeah, you can wear yourself too thin, right? And you're
Well, and you,
obviously
you I find you end up not just working too thin, also like just financials, because you're when things go, like, all of them are over budget right now because of COVID, right? We never budgeted for that. We didn't budget $10,000-$20,000 in COVID tests and additional restrictions and all this stuff we had to do. So all of them are seeing these overages. So who bears the brunt? That's also the other thing the producer wants to do. So be careful. You want to be a producer. When you go, like, the person that bears the brunt most is me, right? Like, I can't go to my director and be like, hey, look, I know I was planning to pay you this, but we have COVID overages, so I'm not going to pay you. Like, it doesn't work that way, right? So producers put out fires. So in many ways it's challenging, but that's ultimately what I always joke with my producing buddies, that we're firemen. That's our job. Is a problem, fire occurs, we put it out. Fire comes up, we put it out. We can't go and be like, oh, I can't figure this one out, guys, we're fucked. No, that's producer can't do that, right? We have to figure out, like, okay, this one's got overages. Okay, we didn't have what we had here. Okay, this interview fell through. What can we do? Always training your mind. Okay, sure, one door closes, another opens. One door closes, another opens. And that is going to happen with every project, just in different ways. Some might be financing, some might be creative, some might be distribution, some might be this. There is always, I haven't had a project that we're just like, oh, there's no problems on this. Just smooth sailing, shoot, deliver, edit, post, go to just, oh, we win Sundance. No, it doesn't work that way. Every project's going to have its challenges. It'll just challenge you in different ways. Some the talent's tough to work with. Sometimes talent's great to work with. Sometimes it's always something. So at least now, having an experience in so many different things, like when a problem occurs, or when you get into where we're at now that we're starting to work with big talent and stuff, now it's litigation is becoming a thing, right? Bigger companies are mad, don't like you having success, so they're throwing ridiculous litigation at you and stuff too. I could do a whole podcast on that. So there's always a new challenge. Luckily, when a new challenge comes now, I just go, that's what it is for today. Hey, I'm going to go watch my daughter play hockey, and I'll tackle it on Monday.
yeah, fair enough, right? Yeah, and that's the other thing is balancing the work and life, right? Which you definitely seem to have a bit of a handle on, it seems.
That's probably where I struggle the most. That's hard because I really love what I do. So at times it's tough to pull away, but my kids help me to do that. because I really do love to watch them. My wife would complain I probably don't put as much effort into her in massages and foot rubs and stuff as I should, but I'm trying to get better at that too. I'm a work in progress like any other project or producer. I'm trying. I make a lot of mistakes along the way, but I find a way. I have to just look at it with my wife the same thing. I'm like, hey, Adam, this is another problem. Your wife is, feeling neglected or unhappy. You have to solve that problem, right? Which that generally, as much as men hate to admit, it's a pretty easy one. If you just put in time, listen, and give a back rub, usually that solves most problems.
Yep, something we all struggle with, I think, at times at least.
And that is, if I had to put a scale on all my talents of like how to keep my wife happy, I'd say I need a lot of work on that. If there's some courses, Matt or any of the guys in here, if you got some courses, I'll sign up. I could use some advice on that one.
We'll get the CSIF to set up some workshops for that. Well, you know what? I'm going to let you go because you've already given me a lot more of your time than I expected. So thank you for
Perfect.
that.
No problem. Thank you for
And
having me on, and I hope my stuff can help out other people. And again, anything else you need, or people can follow me on my socials at Adam Scorgie or find Scorgie Productions, whatever. Send me messages, stay in touch, and I'm happy to help where I can. My time is my most precious asset these days, so forgive me if I'm not as quick to respond as I used to be, but I will. If anybody reaches out to me with great questions and really passionate about something, I will get back to them.
awesome. Thank you so much. Everybody else, we'll see you next week with our next guest. And thanks for tuning in today. And the questions and comments were great. Let's keep that up. Have a great week, everybody. And Adam, if you can just stick around for another minute, that'd be great.
Okay.